All right, guys. Thanks for joining us with another episode of The Scary Door. And I don't think we said this on any of the other episodes, but the way we're doing this is that we each bring a subject that's interesting to us every week. We might have said that before, but I'm letting it be known now. We're all kind of taking turns. Could that change in the future? Possibly. Maybe we'll have some overlap. But the way it is now is, you know, we're just taking turns. So today I'll be bringing in, and I'm certainly this isn't the last time we'll be talking about it, is EVPs, disembodied ghost voices that you have your own personal stories of. Do we believe in that? Do we think it was just our minds playing tricks on us? You know, we give ourselves a little bit of latitude when it comes to that. So I'll be starting
quick, what is an EVP?
So the human voice range. Don't have me dig into any of this because I don't know the science terminology behind it fully or what that means.
It's between 60
but that's
and
okay.
like 12 to 14,000 hertz. There you go.
Well, most of the information that I get on this subject is from a JK Cinema Urban Legends video that I watched about 15, maybe 17 years ago now. And it's called JK Cinema Urban Legends. And they have a section where there's some EVPs. And if you ever feel like getting old school internet scared of the paranormal, go search for the JK Cinema Urban Legends series on YouTube. They have it there, and their website is still live. It's a good old classic piece of internet there. It says here that most spirits have been recorded well below 300 hertz. The average human voice range is from 300 hertz to 3,000 hertz. And there are recording devices that can capture voices, sounds below 300 hertz or above 3,000 hertz. And the reason why people think these are spirits is because the human naturally, with its own mouth making noises, can't make noises below those hertz. So when it's picking up a voice under that hertz level or above it, it can't be a physically living human being. That's the theory behind it, at least. Whether that's actually true or not,
So
who knows?
I know a little bit because I edit the audio. The body of the voice kind of lives between that kind of range, yeah. But every voice can kind of resonate in those areas. So if you were to just kind of single out, like let's say sub 300, it would sound like kind of waffle. It'd be like, but you can generate that. So to actually hear like audible stuff down there, yeah, that's something cool. Yeah.
It's interesting. So okay, we have a we have an information point from the guy who edits our videos and a 15-year-old Macromedia Flash video that's now on YouTube. So I think that's enough for the scientific portion of it. Anyone who's watched a ghost hunting show, yeah, we have our sources more than covered. If you need more than that, I don't know, go find some MLA citations or some peer-reviewed articles on it. But I mean, we've all watched countless ghost shows, and I remember when ghost hunters first came out, and people didn't. EVP wasn't a commonly used term within the ghost hunters lexicon, and it's kind of expanded to be, you know, one of the primary ghost hunting tools that's used, and with that became the advent of something like the spirit box, which I'm actually more skeptical of because it seems like they're just randomly throwing back different words and phrases and then trying to find, you know, whether they're relevant to what the current conversation is or not. I'm not sure where the tonality and where the sounds are that are coming from those spirit box, but they seem a little too active for me to be common spirits that are in a house. So with EVPs, you have a recorder, let's just say some type of Sony recording device. You ask it a question, you hear nothing. But then when you play it back, you might hear something along the lines of "get out," you know, something corny, depending on what you're watching. So shows like Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, Kindred Spirits, which is a show that kind of rekindled my interest in the paranormal because their show was less about continually finding evidence of ghosts and more about connecting with them and trying to understand why they're there, what kind of spirits they may be. how they interact with the environment might be indicative of that. So I think that's a really interesting show for people to check out. But the EVPs they get on that show are wild. They're unbelievable when you hear them. So it's either it's picking up a radio frequency that sounds just like a human trying to make conversation with you, or there's a ghost there. There's no one or the other. There's been some really compelling evidence that I've seen on that show. But even the series I just mentioned, the JK Cinema series, there's someone where someone's walking around a graveyard and there's a kid talking in a British accent that they picked up on an EVP going, I can't find my stone. I can't find my gravestone, which is, it's creepy when you listen to it on the recording. So it used to be, oh, here's the top 5 EVP. There's so many of them across so many ghost hunting shows. It's either the evidence speaks for itself and there's some type of disembodied spirit being recording, or it could be explained away. And when we get to the end of the episode, I kind of want to hear your guys' reasoning as to why it may or may not be true that these are actually disembodied voices coming in through EVPs. But what I mainly wanted to discuss was my own personal experience that I had with EVPs, and it was kind of a live EVP, which I thought was strange. And this was before I knew they even existed.
So was this like you actively like looking for something, or was this like an accidental kind of radio thing?
Accidental radio thing. Just okay. It completely happened under its own volition. So yeah, and that's kind of what made it more interesting. But essentially a spirit spoke to me and about me with another spirit through a Walkman. You know, it was called whatever you called a CD player with headphones. It talked to me through that. Player. Is that what it was? Yeah, I guess it is just a CD player, right? You nailed it. So it's a really long time ago. I must have been about 13 or 14 years old. And we used to go to this church. I was very involved at this church. And I think it was a liquor store before it was a church. It might have been something else, but it's a bit of an ornate building. It's a Protestant church. It wasn't like a large booming like Catholic church or architectural church. It was one night we went on a ski trip with the youth group, and we got back really late. So we all decided that it was so late to call our parents to come and pick us up that we would stay in the basement of the church, which in itself, looking back, was kind of strange. But for some reason, people would always say to me while we were going there, hey, you know, there's something really weird going on at that church. Like, you know, some people have seen things. There's kind of like an informal wives' tale that there were ghosts at that church, which meant, you know, if you said that in a Christian setting, it meant that they were demons. There were demons haunting that church. Who knows? Either way, we went on a long ski trip for a youth group trip, and then when we got back later that night, I was trying to fall asleep, kind of listening to some music on my Walkman. And I don't know why I keep calling it a Walkman. I'm like a boomer. Listening to something on my CD player, which didn't have a radio function, by the way.
Oh, so, okay.
Yeah, I know you're already trying to poke holes there, right? So I was sitting there in this basement.
Real quick, what music were you listening to?
All right. We'll be getting there in a second. So I was sitting there in that basement, surrounded by 10 or 15 people. They had all mostly dozed off, and had this album that I was obsessed with at that age. It was called Everclear, so much for the afterglow. And Everclear is basically a disposable post-grunge kind of Nirvana knockoff pop band that just kind of seeped through. But they spoke to me at that age. Great for an angsty teenager, really, going through 13, 14, 15, where, you know, the guy talks about being a drug addict and you're like, yeah, he's just like me, you know. It was one of those kind of deals. So I was listening, and I knew that CD front to back. I listened to that CD every single night before I went to bed. And so I was listening to it during the youth group trip, just like I had any other time. So as I was not really dozing off, I was more just sitting there hanging out while everyone was falling asleep, listening to this music. And all of a sudden, the music cut off, and I started hearing really distinct growling in my headset. It was like, it wasn't like a dog growling. It was like a howling growl. It was like rah, rah, like kind of comical, demonic growling through my mic. And I was like, I jolted up, awake. It jolted me awake. So that meant at that point I was no longer falling asleep, and I was hearing these noises. Amazingly, I kept my headphones on, and the growling stopped, and there started to become a spirit speaking in a British accent about whether I believed in God or not, and about my faith. And he was talking to someone else that sounded like a demon. So let's just pretend my name is Dave. This person in my headset was going, I don't think Dave believes in Jesus. I don't think he believes in the resurrection. And how can we get him to believe? It was like, it was a really strange conversation that I was listening in on through my headset. And then what talked back to him was more growling and kind of denying what he was saying. So it was almost a kind of spiritual battle I was hearing through my headsets. And I could not believe it. As I was hearing it, I was hitting every single button on my CD player, and I also didn't want to take my headset off because something crazy was happening. And then all of a sudden I heard that demonic growling again, and it kind of overshadowed. It was so noisy that it covered up them talking about me. And keep in mind, it was saying my actual name, and the growling was so loud it hit a fever pitch, and I had to take my headphones off. And when I put them back on, it was completely quiet and back to playing whatever song I was listening to before I guess my CD player became possessed by a demonic entity. So there were a few things going on there. One was, why was there demonic growling through my CD player? Why were there entities, which I wouldn't even know what to call them, angels, spirits, something, talking about me through this headset so I could hear it, or if I was picking something up? And why were they combating each other or something? Was this some sort of like spiritual battle for my soul that I had insight into? Or possibly, you're in a church group, so you're really hyped up on that type of imagery or that, that line of thinking, so it kind of could find a way to formulate itself in your thoughts. You're kind of convinced of what you're hearing. But I look back to this day and I think to myself, that's what happened to me. That was what I heard. I'm pretty convinced of it. So these spirits, they can get a hold of these. I mean, it's the same thing with televisions too, really. They can mess with electronic items kind of that you deal with in day-to-day life. I don't know if it's the same with iPhones or the way things are now. I feel like it's more analog devices they can put themselves into. Yeah. So what were you gonna say?
So at first, before you confirmed there was no radio functionality, I thought maybe some kind of radio signal from far away. But even if the thing didn't have intentional radio functionality, what I learned when I was a kid, because I had kind of a similar experience. I had a radio when I was a kid. I was just listening to it, and nothing crazy happened or whatever. But I just started randomly picking up signals from a French radio station, from across the seas. Right? I thought, that's weird. I didn't really think much of it until a long time later. I got a pair of speakers for my laptop at the time, and again I was really young, and that obviously had no radio functionality. I plugged it in, and then the same French stuff started playing. I'm what?
You have a French ghost.
Yeah, and at first I was wait, hold on, is that a French spirit or something here? So I looked it up, and apparently, for one, it was a common problem with this pair of speakers. But however, the diaphragm for the speaker itself or whatever, it had a tendency. It was really sensitive, and it had a tendency for picking up distant radio waves, certain frequencies.
That's cool.
So even though it wasn't a radio, it'd still pick up on some of those radio waves and then output them through the amplifier. So I was thinking what might have happened to you is, at first I was going to say maybe it was that a distant radio station, but then you said it started talking in context of
it said my
you
name.
And your name.
Yeah.
So then the other thing I was thinking was well, if it was a real thing, then maybe given the nature of like the frequencies and how this stuff works, maybe you tuned into like a reality that you're not otherwise aware of.
It's possible, and I was
And
so
that came
convinced
through
of
your
it.
earpiece.
And I was so convinced of it, I woke up everyone else in the room, and they're like, "Oh my god, shut up, go to sleep." So they were pretty annoyed when it happened. But real quick, I just to put the cherry on top, this church is now shut down because it was found that the pastor was molesting children, and it kind of made the church implode. And he attributes that to being possessed. I mean, it's kind of a cop out, but he said that there was a demonic influence in his family that drove him towards that. And I knew this guy very well. He was whatever. I can't say too much, but let's just say the church fell apart under very, very bad happenings, and a lot of the people who thought that there was a negative spiritual presence in that church were vindicated. And that's why I'm not super surprised that something may have happened to me. And you know what? Maybe someday I'll do a full episode about this place, because I really want to do a documentary on this church at some point. I have a dream about this church probably once a month, and I've told Tyson about that before. I have a dream about it once a month. Nothing's ever happened to me there. I wasn't molested or anything, but I think a lot of things happen to a lot of people at that place, and there's a lot of spiritual energy there. And I keep having recurring dreams about being in that basement all the time, in that area, in that basement. I even had dreams that I ghost hunt in that basement and something happens and then I wake up. So
just off the bat, couple questions. You were fully sure that the voices were coming from the headphones, and it wasn't like the spirits were in the next room and you heard it despite having the headphones on? Like it was coming from the headphones?
I've never thought about that. It's a really good point. I would, if I were to choose one or the other, it would be I heard them on my headphones. But yeah, I mean, it could be something. It could have just been happening right in front of me. It could have just been. I could have been hearing it right in front of me.
Schizophrenics. Is it in your head or is it outside it?
Yeah. Did you hear like any static mixed in with the growling or anything, or was it kind of like?
I did hear static.
Okay. That's
That's
sort of the same like Ghost in the Machine experience that I had.
Really?
Yeah. It's basically I was at this internet cafe playing a game with a friend, and we were talking normally, and halfway through our conversation, his voice fizzles out, and it's replaced by static. And in the static, I heard whispers and growling as well. And then it subsided, and my friend resumed talking as if like nothing happened, like had no time had passed.
Really?
And I'm like, dude, did you not just hear that? And he's like, what are you talking about? So I thought he was trolling me, but it happened again, and this time I heard the voice, the whispers in the static even more. So I think there is something to like this whole like machine like being driven by ghosts and all that. You know, there's something to that.
What did the whisper? Did they say anything?
It was like sort of those like ambiguous. You couldn't decipher what they were saying because it was mixed in with the static, but it's like those like that kind of thing. You know?
Dude, oof, man, that's crazy.
I think the whole like molestation thing makes it even more real, because like isn't it's a touchy subject, but isn't there like a thing there of like a child's energy being quite pure and like in demand amongst like demons and stuff?
What he did probably happened in that church. So
probably happened in that basement as well.
It could have. So that's something to ponder. So yeah,
the other thing is, frequencies are something that transcend somewhat like dimensions and stuff, right? So if like a demon is like a fourth or fifth dimensional kind of entity or whatever, then if it were to like manifest in your reality like that, that would probably be like one of the best ways to do it, right? And maybe
through
that
a machine?
Through a Sony Walkman.
Specifically a machine that like outputs frequencies directly into your ear.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now that I think about it.
Well, that goes for EVP in general, really, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, what can you do about it? But all I know is that when that happened to me, that was probably that was the catalyst for my interest in the paranormal for the rest of my life. So it's kind of foundational, and I think after what happened to that church kind of proved it too. But you talk about strange frequencies and voices talking through them. So I don't know if you guys can understand this, but back when iPods were invented, people really wanted to be able to play them in their cars, but there was no real way for you to do that unless you plugged a special device into your cigarette lighter and plugged your iPod into that, and then you would find a radio station for your iPod to jack into. You know what I'm talking about? So that was a big thing for a while, and I remember one time my friend was telling me, we used to drive around a lot when we were in high school, and he dropped me off at a Christmas party, and he said the second he dropped me off and was driving down the road, he started hearing a disembodied voice talking through his car radio. And this was around Christmas time. And it said, a big Christmas boner brought to you by a helping of shove a cock up her ass or something like that. It was so ridiculous. And my friend was like, excuse me? Like, you would never hear that on the radio, but supposedly that device and the way it interacted with radios in the car led to really weird pickups and situations, you know? What if you stumbled upon some weird ham radio network by accident that you're not supposed to?
That was exactly what happened to me when I was a kid. It was,
what?
Because what you're talking about is like you're tuning into an AM radio station specifically.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, it was exactly that. I had like this handheld radio thing I was listening to at night, and the French radio station picked up where it shouldn't have been there. But I don't live in France for like background. Like, it just makes no sense.
You know what's really strange, and this has happened to me over the last few years. I get woken up by a voice as I'm falling asleep, but no one's there. And I wonder if as you're falling asleep, you know, people like to say you're reaching some lucid dream state where you can see things. What if your mind is reaching some receptive state where it can hear things that it wouldn't normally hear? And that's why I was maybe hearing something that night as well, you know? I don't know.
I've heard that people have that experience, except instead of hearing things, they have the sensation of falling. So maybe they're like,
okay, that's
their spirit's like transitioning different planes as well.
Well, we'll do an episode about that specifically, but real quick, I've had a lot of experiences like that, and clinically I learned there's two terms for it. You've got hypnagogic hallucinations and hypnopompic. The difference being one's
hypnopompic.
The difference being the transition. So it's either you're falling to sleep or you're waking up from sleep. Same kind of thing either side, though. Kind of different to sleep paralysis also. So one that really struck with me, which I might have told you guys before, was I heard a bee or a wasp kind of thing flying around me.
That's terrifying.
As I was, I'm not sure if I was drifting off or waking up, but I was like in this really focused meditative state. And like this wasp bee thing kept following me around, and then it physically went into my ear. I felt it, and I jolted up and I woke up, slapped my ear. There was no bee, there was no wasp, but I felt it and I heard it. It literally went up, it went like zzz, like, you know what I mean?
Ghost bee!
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, I also want to add on that first night where I thought I heard something, or that same night where I thought I heard something in my headphones. I actually went upstairs in this church, and I went to the kitchen was kind of attached to the main area, the main stage upstairs where the congregation sat and all the chairs. So I went up there and got some water, and I walked through the rows of chairs to go back to the basement through the main area. And when I was just going through the door to the lobby to go back downstairs, I swear, out of the corner of my eye, looking back behind me, I saw a woman in possibly Victorian-era clothing standing on the stage, like the silhouette of one standing there looking at me.
What was a Victorian woman doing in America?
Well, okay. What's the term? Colonial woman. There we go. Sorry.
There you go.
That's a good distinction. I'm gonna remember that now. That's a good call out there. A colonial looking woman in a dress standing there, and it might have just been a silhouette. It might have just been for a split second. It could have been nothing. I could have just been amped up because I was scared. But I sprinted downstairs from whatever I saw got to me. So it was a strange night. It was a spiritually loaded night, and I could definitely say it changed my life forever. Just sitting in that basement, hearing those strange voices talk about me. I mean, it has so many elements that are interesting. Where, sometimes you hear a voice. Sometimes you hear a voice through a radio. Sometimes you hear a voice say your name. What about all three of those, and they're having a conversation about you with each other, and they're kind of adversarial? Yeah, that's true. The Demon Podcast.
Yeah, Demon's like, and welcome back to scaring this kid in the church.
Yeah,
this week
welcome to Scaring Dave. It's like, does he believe in? Yeah, I don't know. Let's go try it out.
The Demon's like, guys, we have a banger for you today. We have this kid in this church. He's like some dumbass. He's listening like some dumb album. He's gonna be sick.
Yeah,
don't forget to click the subscribe button.
The head pastor's molesting people, but he doesn't know that yet. That's for another episode. We got it all here. So, but it also, and we'll talk about this. This will be a thread that I'll bring up whenever we talk about ghosts, in particular this subject. And keep in mind, if you like a subject that we're talking about, I want to look at it as more of parts. So this is part one of us talking about EVPs alone. We'll probably have a second episode or third episode about it. So it won't be the last time we ever talk about it. But one of the things that EVPs make me think of is what are they, and why are they trying to say something? Because I personally think that spirits and ghosts are disembodied residual energy left over from a person's spirit. I don't think it's actually them. I don't think they're actual people that are trying to reach out. I think it's their what's left of them on this earth, the spiritual essence of what's left behind that earth, or it's a demon. One or the other, right? So
regarding this EVP stuff, I've always been confused by something, and maybe you can help me understand. This, like, obviously the spirits and the voices and the ghosts and all this stuff, it's clearly a paranormal phenomenon, right?
Yes.
So it always puzzled me why you would try to use equipment that records stuff using natural phenomena to try catch something that's paranormal. Like, if it's paranormal, it obviously doesn't abide by the laws of physics. So why would you use something that abides by the laws of physics, like sound, to detect it? Like, to me, it just doesn't. It's not the same plane of reality, but it's like a spot where both planes are crashing. If I'm being honest, I would trust a Ouija board more than I would trust an EVP meter in that scenario. Am I dumb for that, or what?
We're only going by known physics here. Who's to say that, like, all this phenomena couldn't be explained in some kind of, like, scientific way? I'm sure there is. I genuinely believe there probably is a way to explain all that. Like, just the whole energy frequency thing,
I'm kind of... I'm with you there in some way, Tyson, is that if I were to be a professional ghost hunter, or if you were to ask me, what are your best chances of catching a ghost on camera or catching evidence of a ghost, just for you personally? Like let's say I don't believe in ghosts yet and I want to find out how they're real. What would I do? I wouldn't go get a motion detector, the latest spirit box. I wouldn't go get a van with 4 other people and walk around and be like, where are the ghosts at? What I would do is I'd probably get something like a small EVP Walkman and a flashlight, maybe a UV camcorder or something like that. And that's it. And I would go in by myself. Yeah, you could go even harder. That's the maximum. That's the furthest I would go. Because anything more than that, you're so disruptive to a spiritual connection that you could make. Nothing's going to happen. Well, they have these ghost hunting shows where there's 6 people running around a house with a van outside. Ghosts aren't going to come out for
Yeah,
that. They're going
I
to come
saw
out
this-
when you're scared off your ass, you know?
I saw this one where like they set up like lasers on the floor to like detect motion. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, I don't think that's going to
there are
trip
other ways
anything.
as well. I think you could take like a group of people, deprive their senses, and if they all share an experience, then that has to be something, right?
There's a really interesting one called in Kindred Spirits, where one person wears a headset and just says the things that she's hearing out loud, but she can't hear the questions her partner is asking. So he'll ask, "Hey, how are you?" And then she doesn't hear him ask that question, and she just hears a disembodied voice go, "Good." So she just says, "Good." So he knows that a ghost just basically responded to him. It's really interesting segment that they do, and it's kind of like a way of removing that layer of did you say something or did I say something? But we'll talk about this a lot more later down the road of best ways to pull a ghost out or something. So okay, well, thanks for listening, guys. I hope you got a little spooked out by my story there. I think we're gonna ease into just scary stories in general at some point. I know people are fans of those, and I have a lifetime of them. I think between the three of us, we've gotten quite a few. But until next time, I'm excited to see what's behind the scary door.